Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would do a little bit of a video on this overall, just to kind of overall talk about this once again and to give a little bit of a breakdown of the possible fight that could potentially happen at the super middleweight division, of course, also known as the 168-pound division. And of course, that is the potential fight that could potentially happen within the next couple of fights between that of David Benavidez and Demetrius Andrade. And of course, overall, the main goal of this fight, of the winner, would be to get that major fight, in my opinion, over the number one pound for pound fighter or against the number one pound for pound fighter, Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. But the question is, all in all, at least in my opinion, who would potentially win this David Benavidez versus Demetrius Andrade fight? And I don't know, maybe is there a better fight that they could potentially take on the table? Well, let me overall just basically sort of describe my opinion on this. I think when we talk about Mr. Demetrius Andrade, I don't think that he really has much of a choice left in his career. And it's not that I don't think that Demetrius Andrade has not been avoided by certain fighters, but I think that when you're at this point in time in your career, and also maybe some of the, in my opinion, not so intelligent decisions that Demetrius Andrade made a little bit earlier on in his career, when it came down to it, I think that Demetrius Andrade basically has to put his money where his mouth is. And at the current moment in time, I think that he has to do it very, very quickly. He is 33 years of age. I believe that he turns 34 years old this year. And if he is going to be remembered as a decently great fighter, or at least even possibly get the opportunity, I think that he is overall going to have to get a very, very big fight. Not even just a decent fight. He's going to have to get an extremely big fight. It just is what it is. And the only fight that I can really think of right now that would do him justice would be that David Benavidez fight. And even David Benavidez, there is no guarantee that that fight is going to happen. Canelo Alvarez has talked a decent amount about possibly facing Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez. Now, of course, we know that there are certain channels like Dante's Boxing Nation, which I believe this picture overall was used by him anyway. So just to give him credit there. But when it comes down to it, I was actually about to review this video, but I decided overall just to talk about it for myself. We all know, of course, that a certain amount of channels have alleged that Canelo has been avoiding that of a David Benavidez. I just think that Canelo Alvarez has had not only broader things on his mind, but I think that he does plan to face David Benavidez eventually. Unless, of course, he were able to actually lose to Demetrius Andrade. But we'll see all in all what happens. Basically, when it comes to Demetrius Andrade, I don't think he has a bigger choice. I don't think that he has another choice. David Benavidez, apparently in his next fight, he's going to be facing former, I believe, IBF middleweight champion David Lemieux. And David Lemieux, in my opinion, once upon a time, he was a decent fighter. I wouldn't necessarily call him an A-grade fighter, but he was a fighter all in all that was very dangerous in the division. He was known for having wins over Gabriel Rosado and this, Hassan Nadam, I believe, the Frenchman fighter. But when it comes down to it overall, David Lemieux, I don't think that he's going to have enough size. And on top of that, I don't think he's going to have enough skill to defeat someone like a David Benavidez. He is very powerful, but at the end of the day, I just think that David Benavidez is probably going to be a little bit too much for him. And David Lemieux, I don't know all in all how much he's really going to be able to fight back with that of a David Benavidez, who pretty much is a natural light heavyweight, has a better chin than that of a David Lemieux. And Lemieux is just, in my opinion, a little bit too hittable. And he can tire out a little bit in the middle rounds. So I don't really have a doubt that David Benavidez more than likely is going to win his next fight. And if Demetrius Andrade does face that of a Zach Parker, I have watched certain highlights on Zach Parker. I haven't really watched full fights of him, but he's not really someone that I'm overly impressed with. So, overall, in my opinion, if these two do want that Saul Canelo Alvarez fight, or possibly even another big fight later on down the line, like maybe a Jamal Charlo, or maybe even someone like a Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, or who the hell else knows is out there. Maybe later on down the line, maybe a Edgar Berlanga, or maybe someone, like a David Morrell, someone who may be on the come up. But if one of these guys overall want that big Canelo Alvarez fight, in my opinion, more than likely they are going to have to face each other. If you're asking me personally, who I think would win this fight, I think that it's a very tough fight. I think that either or could win the fight. I actually think that it's the perfect matchup. And the reason why I think that it's the perfect matchup is because I think that both of these gentlemen actually can counter on the other fighter's mistakes. Demetrius Andrade is a person that, of course, likes to move around the ring. He tends to fight a little bit more defensive. He does have certain offensive skills, but he also, in my opinion, does have certain holes in his game as well. He is not always extremely defensively responsible, at least compared to other defensive masters that I've seen. When it comes down to it, sometimes he can be hit. He can be hurt. I don't think that he has what I would call an A-plus chin. but he is someone that is very decently crafty. He's a person that is very decently slick and very decently tricky. He could give David Benavidez a lot of problems, who does not necessarily have the greatest of feet, does not have an elite defense either, and on top of that, when it comes down to it, does not have a great head movement. But the big question overall that I have for Mr. Demetrius Andrade is, will his power really translate enough, in my opinion, to defeat someone like that of a David Benavidez? I think David Benavidez, basically the way that he fights, he pretty much fights like a freight train. I don't necessarily think that he has a plan B, and that freight train is basically only going to come one direction. But unless overall you have enough power to stop that freight train, I don't think all in all that you're going to have a very good time. It just is what it is. So in my opinion, what Demetrius Andrade is going to have to do, he's going to have to show his power early. He's going to have to go to the body early, use his jab. And in my opinion, more than likely, if Demetrius Andrade is going to win this fight, he's probably going to have to knock down David Benavidez or severely hurt him within, the first few rounds. That's what I personally believe. And if he cannot do that, more than likely David Benavidez is not going to respect his power, and more than likely he is just going to trailblaze through him. So we will see all in all if these two actually are serious about taking the fight. These two allege that they are the most avoided fighters within those weight divisions. So of course, making this fight, it shouldn't be no problem. But we'll see all in all what happens, or at least not a big problem, because of course, one is with the zone, one is with PBC. But in my opinion, if Demetrius Andrade wanted to do something for his career, I believe all in all that the best decision, of course, would be to sign with the PBC, or certainly get this David Benavidez fight. And of course become, debatably a three-weight division champion, or not debatably, excuse me. But if you're able to defeat David Benavidez for a vacant title, if Canelo does vacate his titles, of course, you would then become a three-weight division champion. So it would be very, very interesting overall to see what would happen here. And of course, if David Benavidez were to defeat Demetrius Andrade, I would think that Canelo Alvarez more than likely would fight him, because I think that he's basically always planned on fighting David Benavidez. At least overall since he's been in these upper weight classes. I just think all in all that he's not going to do it at the current moment in time, or at least overall for his next fight. But we'll see all in all what happens. As for Demetrius Andrade, I think if he wants that Canelo Alvarez fight, the only way that he's going to possibly get it is if he actually beats someone like a David Benavidez. Then all in all, Canelo basically will have to fight him. He'll basically say, well, you know what? This man is a three-weight division champion, and now all in all, he's at least worth fighting when it comes down to it with the risk that he brings. But it is what it is. But anyways, I just think that this fight is very particularly interesting. At the current moment in time, if you're asking me, who do I think would win this fight? I would personally go with David Benavidez. I think more than likely this fight would probably end up in similar fashion to what the Arasani Lara versus Jarrett Hurd fight was, at least debatably, except maybe even a more dominant, set in terms of David Benavidez. But you never know. Demetrius Andrade, he does have some slickness towards him. He is a little bit of a, defensively tricky fighter. And if he moves around a lot in this fight, he can create a lot of problems for David Benavidez. But I don't necessarily think that Demetrius Andrade, like I said, I've never been as impressed with him as what many other people have been. There's been one performance in his career where I thought that he looked fantastic. And that was once upon a time, I believe, against an African fighter. That was all the way back in 2018. Can he put on a performance like what he did against that fighter, against the David Benavidez? We'll see what happens. It will be very, very interesting. I would be pleasantly surprised if Demetrius Andrade was able to actually put on a performance like that, and if he were able to defeat David Benavidez, especially in dominant fashion, especially for not really someone that you can debate that he probably could fit at 168 because he has pretty much the same stature as a lot of those guys there, but especially for within one of your first two fights at 168. If you're able to completely dominate David Benavidez, or either or, basically that would be, in my opinion, the golden ticket to Mr. Solo Canelo Alvarez. But it'll be very interesting. But anyways, that's pretty much all I got for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.